Okay, everyone, good evening. Welcome to the DIA webinar that we're doing with Ingenie. I'm joined this evening with Ingenie's CEO, Chris McKee, and Freddie Smith, I believe. Sorry for and they are from Ingenie, and they are going to, or Chris is going to go through what Ingenie, who they are, what they do, what they're doing to contribute towards road safety, and in general, how you can use black box, how new drivers can use black box telematics in their car for better car insurance and things like that. So, and also, it's not just getting cheaper car insurance; it's all about how we can use this modern technology to help improve things in general. So the way people drive, I mean, I'm not going to go through everything with you because I know very little. In fact, Chris is more and Freddie are the experts on this, so they are going to take you through it. But as I say, if there are any questions or anything that you have along the way, then please type them in your text box. I can read them out, and Chris is happy to answer them. Any bits that they can't answer or we can't answer this evening, I'm sure that that'd be very few and far between. But if there was anything, don't worry, I can keep a log of your questions, and we can come back to you on an individual basis. So that's not a problem at all. Okay, Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Olivia. And right, if you go to the first slide, it's headed the young driver problem. As the father of 3 daughters in their 20s, this is something that I know quite a bit about from a parent's point of view as well as from the Ingenie side. Now, every ADI knows the problems that their young students face. It's not just the financial issues, it's also the realisation of the responsibility that comes with driving, plus all of the social and emotional pressures of getting on the road. And the fact is, young drivers crash more often than older drivers. That's plain to see from the government statistics, and the same has been true for many years. It's a fact that 1 in 5 young drivers has a crash in their first 6 months of driving. And in 2013, nearly 1,300 young road users were killed or had life-changing injuries. And that's a staggering 4 a day. And anything we can do to reduce that number is obviously very worthwhile. Now, the government has stalled on young driver safety, particularly in regard to graduated licensing. But I'm pleased to say that it's now begun its own investigation into telematics, which we're Ingenie are supporting by providing resource and data. We all know that driver training is really important. But at Ingenie, we carried out a survey of around 1,000 young drivers. And we found that 88% of them hadn't taken the recommended number of lessons. Many people still believe that if they pass their test, or someone they know passes their test after only 10 lessons, that makes the person a good driver, rather than seeing that that person is still an inexperienced driver. At Ingenie, we encourage post-test lessons. We believe that by working together, ADIs and black box insurers can help young drivers make the leap from learner driver to safer driver. So what is black box insurance? Black box insurance uses something called telematics, which may sound pretty state-of-the-art, but in fact it's been around for decades. Basically, it's a technology used for transmitting data over long distances. At the high-tech end, it's used in Formula One cars. It's also used in everyday cars and commercial vehicles for things like fleet communications, letting the fleet controller know where his vehicles are, how far they've driven. Now, Ingenie's telematic box contains something called a gyroscope that measures braking and cornering, an accelerometer captures speed and acceleration, and GPS to help us map journeys and locate stolen vehicles. Now we take readings 10 times a second, that's at 10 hertz, The data is then transmitted via SIM card, like you'd have in your mobile phone. We use the EE network because we believe it has the best coverage. We measure speed, acceleration, braking and cornering, and then we analyse the trends rather than individual events. The reason we do that is, for example, one harsh braking event could actually be very good driving to avoid an accident. Whereas if someone's continually braking, accelerating, that's almost certainly poor driving, more likely to lead to an accident. So we take this data and then we adjust the insurance premium every 3 months, depending on how the car's being driven. Now, traditional policies wait until the end of the year, but we believe we should adjust it more regularly than that to give the driver incentives. Now, once we've analysed the driving data for trends, we translate it into easy-to-read Twitter-style messages, and we send the messages to our customers every 10 days. All data is kept secure, and we will only share it with the police with our customers' approval, or in some cases, if the police present us with a court order. Over the past 4 years, I can only remember receiving 3 court orders. One was in connection with a series of burglaries, and 2 were following serious accidents. But on the other hand, I can recall at least 8 cases where our customer asked us to give the data to the police to prove that they were innocent of a charge or an accident. 2 of the cases appeared to be where the customer's car seemed to have been cloned, and we proved that they weren't at the location of the alleged traffic offences. For the first case, the driver was alleged to have been in Manchester, and we could prove that he was in London at the time, so it definitely wasn't him. And similarly, in the other cases, we proved that the drivers weren't at the location claimed, so couldn't have been involved in accidents. So we think they were probably fraudulent claims that we managed to defeat. We also regularly use data to prove that our customer wasn't responsible for a collision. Things like multi-vehicle motorway accidents, where we can show that our car was hit while stationary. But equally, if our customer is to blame, it's a quick way of just getting that claim settled. It's hands up, yes, it was our driver's fault, so let's settle the claim and move on. Now, on the screen you should be able to see an example of an iPhone app. And this is how we give our customers a score out of 100. We reward good drivers with discounts of up to 21%. And we show them how much they're on track to save. So in this example, it says a customer's on track to save £62. If he was getting the 400, which is the top mark, he'd get £108 back on his premium. But we also believe that you need a stick as well as the carrot. So in the worst cases, we can increase premiums by up to 10%. And that does happen. We do get some bad drivers who just bought telematics because it was cheaper than traditional insurance. Now, moving on to this slide, this shows that not all black box insurers are the same. You can see that when Ingenie started writing business in 2011, there were very few telematics propositions out there. I think Ingenie was the 3rd in the market. There are now around 25 different telematics propositions for private car insurance, and most of them are for young drivers. Now, there are 2 main reasons for this growth. The first is that telematics insurance has proven to work, and the second is that the cost of technology has come down significantly. As I said earlier, not all telematics insurers are the same. Some insurers use a driver app, but without having a fixed box. But these are mainly just marketing gimmicks, and they're very successful at that, but they aren't robust enough to be used for insurance pricing, because there's all sorts of things can happen. The customer might run out of battery on the phone, they might forget their phone, they might have the phone in the pocket of a jacket that's hanging up, so it's swinging about, so you can't get proper data. Also, some of the black boxes used by insurers, all they do is count events. They count, perhaps the number of times a driver does something such as going over the speed limit or braking sharply. Now, at Ingenie, we believe it's important to know a lot more detail about driving. So we don't just count the events, we also monitor things like the actual speed and the duration of the event. For example, a driver might break the speed limit on a slip road coming off a motorway by taking a couple of extra seconds to slow down from 70 miles an hour. Now it's true that that is an event, it's breaking the law, but we think it's very different to driving at 30 miles an hour above the speed limit for 45 seconds or more, and that does happen. That's serious. You know, we had a case today of someone doing over 72 miles an hour and a 30 mile an hour limit. So you need to know that that's a very serious offence. Now the key is driver education. So it's important that we can accurately identify what our drivers could do better. So we can point it out to them, point them in the right direction. Now some telematics policies have curfews, or they charge additional premiums for late night driving. But we believe things like that are counterproductive. There was one particularly serious case that hit the headlines a couple of years ago where the driver was rushing home to beat the curfew. And the fact that he was speeding and rushing back contributed to a fatal accident, very sadly. And we believe that young drivers need to learn. So provided they're driving safely, we're happy to see them driving any time of the day or night. So how do we do things a little differently? Well, Ingeni's entire focus is on young drivers. We'll ensure the parents on the policy, but it's young drivers we're mainly interested in. So before we launched, we held focus groups with young drivers and with their parents. And our whole approach is geared to helping young drivers. Young people are very quick to let you know their views on social media. And so we're constantly adjusting our systems so we can best help them. And as I said before, imposing lots of restrictions, we don't believe that that's the answer. That won't change behaviour, and many young drivers will just rebel. We believe that education is the answer. So we try to act as a co-pilot. We're there to help bridge the gap between passing the test and going it alone. ADIs do a fantastic job at getting our young drivers to a point where they can pass the test and hopefully be ready to drive alone. But the high number of crashes in the first 6 months after passing the test shows that young drivers need more support to maintain the skills that they've been taught. But there's only so much an ADI can do with the lesson time available, especially if people aren't having the required number of lessons. And that's where I think we can help. Getting feedback on their driving should help young drivers recognise where they need to improve. And plus the incentive of discounts of up to 21%, which on a £1,500 premium, which is average these days, that can lead to a saving of over £300, and that's pretty motivational to a young driver. In addition, we'll hopefully help them earn the first year's no-claim bonus, and that's significant as well because no-claim bonuses are up to 30% for the first year. Now, as a result of this, with Ingeni, only 1 in 8 drivers has a claim in the first 6 months compared to 1 in 5 young drivers nationally. That's around a 40% improvement. And there's a photo of a young lady on the slide. That's a young lady called Emily, and she was one of our worst performing customers, and she got a score of just 16 out of 100. But she really liked the idea of the messages, and we spoke to her, and within a couple of months she'd managed to improve her driving score to 81, and she's now one of our best advocates. Now, before we launched Ingeni, we spent a couple of years developing our proposition. We looked at various telematic boxes, and we worked with experts in telematics, in engineering, worked with the police, road safety experts, and young driver psychologists from Cranfield University. Our aim was to build a community of better, safer drivers who could get on the road at an affordable price and stay safe. One of the problems we discovered was that the frontal lobe of the brain, it's getting a bit technical, but the frontal lobe of the brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25. Now, that's the part of the brain that deals with risk perception. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you can't become a good driver under the age of 25, I think Lewis Hamilton was world champion at 21. But something has to bridge that risk awareness gap, and that those drivers need training. Now, alongside the work on driver safety, we conducted focus groups with young drivers and their parents, asking how they felt about car insurance and what they wanted from a telematics product. The typical response we got was that insurance is just like any other bill. Young people thought that insurers weren't on their side. Insurers were just out to make as much money as they could. And in the speech bubbles there, we've got actual quotes. It's ridiculous. I feel like they don't want me. The industry treats us with caution and suspicion. And as young drivers, we get stereotyped. They bump up prices. So the drivers were very pleased that we said with telematics, we could actually treat them as individuals rather than lumping them all together. So we set out to prove that the fears were wrong. It was clear we had to do a lot of work, and so we set out to change those views. We aimed to be social, collaborative, and on the side of the young driver. We wanted them to trust in Genie and to trust the road safety advice we were giving them. We believed the best way to do that was through regular communication. Now, when we started giving messages, we realised that nearly all 17 to 25-year-olds are constantly on their telephone, on their mobile phone. So we built a helpful app that they could relate to. Now, we started giving messages every 14 days. And the feedback we've got was they wanted it more regularly, so we changed that to 10 days. And we thought any more regular than that might not be adding to the benefit of messaging, because the messaging might not change so much in that less than 10-day cycle. So how does Genie work? We use the app to give our customers regular feedback on their driver behaviour. The feedback is also available online, but that's probably more used by the parents and the young drivers. As I said, we usually give customers feedback every 10 days. And you can see from the images there that we're giving feedback on speed, acceleration, braking and cornering. Now, if someone's driving badly, we have to give them feedback more regularly, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But the feedback feeds an overall score out of 100, which in turn results in a premium increase or a discount. Now, it's a rule of thumb, 70% of our drivers get a discount. That's very good news. 7 out of 10 are good drivers and get a discount. 10%, that's 1 in 10, get a load. The remaining 20% see no change in their premium. Now, importantly, we know that drivers who check their feedback at least twice a month are 42% less likely to have a crash than those drivers who never check their feedback. Now, that probably stands to reason that people who don't check their feedback are less concerned. And people who check it regularly, there's a reason that they're checking it. They want to know how they're doing. Now, I mentioned that we send it every 10 days, which means we generally send 3 sets of messages a month. But on average, our customers access their messages 14 times a month. So we believe that's because they're sharing their messages with friends and family. And I guess if you're doing well, you're happy to share that with people. But not everyone gets a good message. Our regular messages are based on a simple colour code going through various colours and shades, with green meaning good, through to red meaning dangerous. Generally speaking, someone who gets red messages has a 1 in 4 chance of crashing, compared with someone who gets green messages who has a 1 in 10 chance. Now, we also have black message, that's the worst offence, and that's for drivers who do 30 miles an hour or more above the speed limit, or persistently speed at a lower level. And for them, almost 1 in 3 of them will have an accident during the course of the year. For these cases, we don't wait 10 days to contact them. They're sent a message the same day or the following day. And they're also likely to receive a phone call from something called our Driver Behaviour Unit. Now, Because telematics insurance is generally cheaper than traditional insurance, it attracts all types of drivers, not just the safe and conscientious ones. That was probably the situation in the beginning, but as it becomes more mass market, people go on aggregator sites and often just take the cheapest insurance. Now, most insurance see the change as negative because bad drivers cost them more money in claims payouts. However, we see these drivers as an opportunity to improve their driving. Now, there are some young drivers, and I mentioned one before, doing 72 and a 30 limit. There are some young drivers who pay no attention to our calls or messages, and there's little we can do for them. And at the end of the day, either they cancel or we have to cancel them because they're an unacceptable risk for the insurer because they will not obey the speed limits, and driving at 30 miles an hour or more above the speed limit is clearly reckless and dangerous. But we set up the Driver Behaviour Unit, DBU for short, specifically to work with poorly performing drivers who needed some guidance, the ones we thought we could help. And the DBU is staffed by young psychology qualified graduates who've received advanced driver training, and they're very good at dealing with customers. So if a customer is showing a pattern of reckless behaviour that we know typically leads to a crash, the team will get in touch with them and hopefully change their driving behaviour before they cause an accident. Now, the call typically takes about 10 minutes, and it goes through an awareness of the problem through to behaviour change and hopefully long-term change. For those of you with a psychology background, it's called the Trans-Theoretical Behaviour Change Model. Now, that's a bit complicated for me, but what I do know is that in 9 out of 10 cases, we've been able to improve driving to a satisfactory level within just 30 days. So we find that most young drivers want to improve. And like Emily, who we saw before, they just need some help and motivation. Now, insurance isn't generally seen as being cool by young people, but by using social media, we've managed to gain good acceptance of our proposition and establish a collaborative approach to behaviour change. We see a lot of our drivers sharing their feedback. There's some examples here. We share the feedback on social media, particularly when they've received a discount and got good or green messages. This creates a positive upswing in the number of young people who see driving well as the obvious choice over driving recklessly. And saving money is definitely cool. We also share our driving tips and advice, as well as driving news that affects our young community. Things like changes in the law. For example, it's amazing how many motorists of any age are oblivious to new legislation about things like tax discs and paper licenses that we've seen recently. Now, we also post educational content in our Young Driver's Guide, which you can see on our website. And we also share that on Facebook and Twitter. We post information about learning to drive, how to run a car, how insurance works, and all sorts of topics that are useful to young drivers. We also post less serious content, which our drivers share and comment on. While our tone is sometimes a little jokey, the important thing is that our drivers and other people of their age are finding this content online and gaining vital knowledge that will help them feel confident and stay safe. In fact, the Young Driver Guide is getting nearly 50,000 visitors a month. Now, following the success of our Young Driver Guide, we recently launched a Parents Guide. The right parental involvement is very, very important, and we find that young drivers who involve the parents have a 28% lower risk of having a crash. Now, I suspect you have students whose parents do little more than hand over the cheque, and others who are too involved and who teach their children bad driving habits. Either way, we thought parents needed more guidance when it came to the topic of learning to drive. We didn't want to teach them how to teach your child to drive, which we don't encourage, but we wanted to do how your driving style affects your child, how to practice your skills, how to practice the skills your child is learning with their instructor, and how to help your child deal with pressure in the car. Things like driver distraction, very important. And we believe that from being in the car with their parents as a child to taking on the responsibility of a full licence, young people need more support from their parents. And we also think that parents need more support to make that happen. So moving on to the future. What does the future hold? We see potential for telematics to become part of the learning process. Now, possibly an app-based learning program that lets the ADI and the learner check off their progress collaboratively. Now, young drivers rarely have crashes when learning to drive with their instructor, so you wouldn't need to have a fitted black box in the car. You could have something as simple as an app on the instructor's phone that assesses things like cornering and braking. And the flexibility would allow ADIs to accommodate what each young driver wants. It would give them a taste of telematics without them having to commit to a fitted box in the car. Okay, so I think we're just about the end of that. So any questions, please?
Yeah, we did have, everyone's been listening really intently. So this is the time now, everyone, guys, to, put your questions on the chat box, and anything at all that you want to ask, then ask away. We did have a question from one of our members just asking it was quite near the beginning. I didn't interrupt you. I managed to answer it on here, but just double checking the recommended number of lessons. I mean, the DVSA's average is around 45 hours of professional tuition, with around about another 22, I believe, of private practice in addition to that. So, I mean, but stressing that is an average. Not everybody's, I'm an ADI myself, and not everybody needs that much, but some people need way more than that, and some people need about the average. So, it's a very, it varies, can vary an awful lot. I had a question here from Paul. How much is the average cost per box?
So there's two things here. There's the cost of the box and the cost of the insurance. Now we include the cost of the box and all the monitoring, everything within the cost of the premium. Now the average premiums, it depends on the age. So if you're 17, it's more expensive than if you're 18, etc., etc. And I said that the average premium, roughly £1,500. It has come down recently because of telematics. So you're probably looking at about £1,350. So the cost of the box itself depends on the type of device you have. But now the box itself is typically about £50. But then you've got fitting charges that have to be professionally fitted.
Okay, so hopefully that answers that one for you then, Paul. Okay, another question. With black errors, so you mentioned your colour coding scheme, you've got the green, red and black. So with black errors occurring regularly, isn't there a concern that you are knowingly allowing your client to drive breaking the law? At what time do you have to intervene, take insurance cover away, for example?
Yeah, so what happened when we were setting up Ingenie, we had lots of conversations with people like the police, and they highlighted that if we knew that our customers were breaking the law, we could be opening ourselves up to liability. So as soon as anybody does anything like that, they get messages, so we send it to their phone. I said it'll be the same day or the next day, and we also send them emails as well. And we give them one chance. So if they do it again, they'll be cancelled. So we cancel it.
Okay.
The other thing is, if they persistently do lesser offences, we will send them messages and we'll speak to them as well, and just warn them of the dangers. Now, most people, once they know that we are monitoring and the device can tell what they're doing, most of them do improve. But there are some who, as I said, they don't bother to check their feedback, and they only took out the insurance because it's cheap, and those are the ones who get cancelled very quickly. By law, we have to give them 7 days notice, but with the extreme events, so that they get cancelled. For example, if someone was doing 40 miles an hour over the speed limit, the example I gave earlier, they wouldn't get a warning, they would just get a cancellation letter.
Yeah, because that is blatantly dangerous, isn't it? I mean, you know, that's not good. Okay, thank you, Chris. Next question. John has asked, what is the discount for a student with Pass Plus? Or do you recognise that? Pass Plus has been a bit of a, dare I say it, a dying duck for a while. Is it something that you would recognise?
So we give a discount. The only scheme we give a discount for at the moment is an Atom, so that's Drive IQ Pro, if they go through that. And that's a trial that we did. But because we give discounts for good driving, we can actually give it for how they drive rather than the fact that they've taken the additional lessons for Pass Plus. And for Pass Plus, I know from previous experience that the discounts that the insurance industry gave wasn't reflected in better claims experience. So we'd rather do it on how people actually drive when we're monitoring it.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Are you able to say what percentage of clients as a ballpark would get their cover cancelled? Or is that something that you'd rather divulge?
I'm happy to say that, and that's about 5% of drivers get cancelled.
Okay.
And that's either them cancelling or us cancelling.
Yes, because obviously sometimes you've explained your obligations in terms of your agreement with the police and things like that, but yeah, sometimes if they want to cancel, then that's their choice, isn't it? So that's also in the mix.
We do get cases where, very early on we had a case where the customer actually watched the engineer fitting the box. And the box is fitted behind the dashboard of the car. He actually watched him fitting in the morning. And in the afternoon, he was driving down the A3. I don't know if anybody knows the A3, but he was doing it's sections. It's either a 70 or a 50 limit, depending on where you are on the A3. And he was doing 102 down. It was the 70 part rather than the 50 part. In the afternoon, having watched the guy fit the box. So you've got people like that. And he got a phone call the next day, but he was, I think, probably the first one that we cancelled.
Yeah, that's quite scary, isn't it? I mean, it does go on, but you're seeing it, aren't you? You're thinking, goodness gracious, you know, and you're seeing this data, and you're thinking, goodness. Just the next question. How do you determine what is acceptable, unacceptable, acceleration, cornering or braking? Someone's asked.
Okay, so if I know you didn't ask it, but if I take speed first. So for speed, we go by the general police guidelines, and I know they're looking at potentially changing it in some areas, but 10% plus 2. So if they're doing in a 30 limit, or they're doing up to 35, they may be keeping up with traffic, may be going a bit fast. But we'd say, we're not going to intervene at that. But above that, they then start getting messages. That acceleration, because of the type of car that we insure, most of them are, young drivers have 1 litre, 1.2, 1.4 litre cars. And it's quite difficult to accelerate away rapidly. So those who do, we set the threshold, and those who do accelerate, we've got proof that they're more likely to have crashes. And it's a straight line on the worse they get, the more likely they are to have accidents. Braking, as I said during the presentation, if it's a single event, that could be very good driving. It could be something's gone out into the road in front of them, cars brake very sharply, unexpectedly in front of them, and it could be for some reason there wasn't much space, so it might not be good driving. And we had one of the events quite early on was someone in a McDonald's drive-through, I think a bad incident. But if it's just one, we'll have a look at it. But it's frequent bad harsh braking. As I said, the worst thing, especially with motorway driving, we've all seen it, where someone is accelerating and braking, and that's often tailgating, more likely to lead to an accident. So we set our thresholds, and we measure it, and there is a definite trend. The people who get the amber messages, the red messages, are much more likely to have accidents. And cornering is a little bit more difficult, and we had to do an awful lot of work because there's lots of mini roundabouts all over the place. So we mapped every single mini roundabout in the country, and so we can ignore those because there's often some sharp cornering there. But it's, we look at combinations, again, acceleration and cornering, speed and cornering and things like that. And again, that's where we use the accelerometer, and we use that to say, okay, this is behaviour that's more likely to lead to an accident. And the stats are absolutely clear. The people who get red messages for any of those things, so it's, whether it be acceleration, braking, cornering or speeding, they are much more likely to have accidents.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, what's your views, Chris, on? I mean, the DIA's view is we do like to encourage pupils, customers, learners, whichever label wish to put on them, but people having ongoing post-test training with an ADI, being the driver expert, as well as the black box system. I mean, do you have any cases of that where you're able to look at stats and think, well, because they've had that professional ADI intervention as well as your technology, do you ever do that at all?
Yeah, that's something we were looking at trialling, which is rather than give someone a premium load, could we say, well, look, we can either do that or you can have additional lessons, because rather than charge more money, we'd actually prefer it if they drove safer, because it means they're less likely to have an accident. It's not something that we can mandate. It's something we're looking at, how do we do it? How is it acceptable to different parties? So I think we would be amenable to that if we can make it work for the customers. And the ADIs would presumably enjoy that as well. But at the moment, I said we limit increase in premiums to 10%. So that could be as much as, I said, on the £1,500 premium, £150, and you get a few lessons for that as well. If someone can come up with a proposal that we could work with, we'd be happy to look at that.
Okay, well, we'll continue talking to you then, Chris, as DIA. We'll talk. Okay, so another question someone's asked about the actual fitting of the equipment. So do you provide the fitters, or is that up to the client to find their own?
No, we outsource that. We've got a national coverage. There's certain remote parts of Scotland where it takes a little while to get there, but the rest of the country has very good coverage, and we normally have the box fitted within 10 days. And our fitters will go to someone's house or place of work or a place of education, and they do that. And it normally takes about 40 minutes to an hour to fit the box, depending where on the vehicle. But now we've got a complete series of videos for the fitters, so they know, if it's a Peugeot, if it's a Ford, whatever it is, they can look at this and say this is the best place to fit the box.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. On average, say how long after a young driver passes their test do they retain their black box? So is there a maximum amount that they would keep them?
So it depends on the individual. We're happy. Now, we say we'll insure people from 17 to 25, but we do have some people who are 26 and 27 who just continue to renew with us. The problem for us is the cost of the box and the fitting. As you get to sort of 27, 28, your premiums come down, so we can't stay competitive and load on the cost of the box on a new vehicle if they change car. But some people, insurance is very expensive when you're 17, when you have no claim bonus. Some people at the end of the year, they don't want to continue with a box, and they can get cover from someone else at a reasonable price, and so they'd rather not have the box. Some people, and it's normally the better drivers, they like the box, they like the messages, and they really appreciate the discounts as well. So they continue. You know, we started in 2011, and we've got customers who've been with us for the full 4 years.
Okay, lovely. Okay, have you ever had any cases where a telematics box has been asked to be fitted into, say, a private car before the test? So the person's thinking, oh, you know, I might use this on the test or something like that. Do you ever have any knowledge of that happening?
No specific knowledge, but it must have happened because we've got about 5% of our customers are provisional license holders. So it depends if they took the test in their own car or in the ADI's car.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you don't know, do you? I mean, that car could be used on a test, or you know, you just don't know if it's a private car, that is. Okay, I mean, that's all the questions for now. I mean, there might be one or two more that drip through, but that was really interesting, Chris, and thank you ever so much. Really interesting point, actually. Lots of people see telematics as a way of, the term Big Brother is used quite a lot, as I'm sure you've heard, and people feel perhaps, you know, whether they're a new driver or even perhaps an employee working for a company, they've got a fleet vehicle of some description. Some people don't like it. They think, oh goodness, you know, I feel like I'm being watched. But it's also that it's the way I believe that the technology is put across to say, well, this is what it's for and this is what we're monitoring. So to have that level of transparency with that person, to give them that level of comfort with it. Also, interesting point you raised about proving customers innocent, where sometimes you've proved that they weren't in Manchester, they were actually in London, for example, or a similar example that you used earlier. So, you know, to defeat fraudulent claims. So that's also really interesting. Also, yeah, I mean, you mentioned about the curfews. They're not a good idea. As you say, with the example you gave, I also heard about that, and I'm sure lots of our listeners tonight have done as well. Absolutely awful and absolutely tragic, because, as you say, it just puts tons of pressure on that driver to get back. And they're also something, as you say, to rebel against. So they work out to be quite counterproductive in many ways. The other thing I liked as well as we've earlier in the year we've just done a whole series of our free road shows called Parent Power, where we're talking about engaging the parents, and you know, we went into a little bit depth with it, but also, you know, what you do about engaging the parents as well in their own driving and get them to be a bit more aware of their own decision making and choices and consequences, but not to teach, because that is the job of the ADI as the driver training expert. So to have that divide there, you know, so you're going so far to say, look, mum and dad, or whoever they are, but I think that's good, and that's positive, because, as you say, you know, the studies have shown little tots as big as 3 years old, you know, that's all, they'll pick up attitudes and behaviours. And some studies have shown that excuse me, sorry, I knew I'd start coughing again, that's actually the case. So by the time we get them as ADIs, even if they've not driven a car before, they've already got sometimes some pretty fixed ideas on what they think a good driver is, because it's based on the people that they know and they trust. So it's difficult sometimes for us to undo some of that thoughts and behaviours and beliefs and values to then try and build it back up again, and it's a challenge. You know, we're not working with that blank slate sometimes, and I mean that in the best possible way. It is 8:15, I've had a long day, but we're not working with that blank slate sometimes, and I do believe that sometimes it's harder to undo things, and then to unpick it all, then start building up again, than it is to start again from scratch. So that's a really, you know, really interesting point. So thank you for that. Just checking the messages. No, if anyone's got any last minute questions, now's the time to say, or forever hold your peace. What I'm going to do now is move on to your next slide so you can...
But just before that, Olivia, it's interesting, you talked about data privacy.
Yeah.
And the media were all over this, and we had, lots of articles about black box insurance and how it's infringement on civil liberties, etc., etc. But when you think of our audience, they put everything up on Facebook. They're happy their mobile phones giving their location, etc. And we haven't had a single issue from any of our customers at all about sharing that data. As I said, we don't share it with the police without their say-so, and it's helped more than it's been used against them. There's only a few cases where it's been used. One was a serial burglar, but I won't go into any more than that. So whilst people think it may be an issue, data privacy isn't. So if I just move on to a few final thoughts.
Yeah, okie dokie.
I think it's important to remember if ADIs are talking to the students about insurance, that no one insurer is always the cheapest. Not all black box insurers are the same. So it does pay to shop around to find a product that suits the individual. So I think that's important. And finally, I'd like to thank you all for the amazing work that you do as ADIs, and leave you with a final thought that we'd love you to help young drivers be open-minded about black box insurance. Hopefully I've been able to describe how it all works, but if you've got any questions, please come back either to me or through the DIA. But I believe that working together we can support young drivers, helping them stay safe, which is very important, and also helping them to find affordable insurance. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you ever so much, Chris, and thank you, Freddie, for your time this evening. It's much appreciated. Lots of people with some, very good questions, and thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully it's been really useful for you. As I say, this has been recorded, so it will be within the next week or so. It will be available in the members area for everyone to access. So thank you everyone, and thank you, Chris and Freddie again, and good night.